Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast where we talk about real Canadian rugby. I'm Stu Hardy, joined again by Jeff Robinson and Edward Pye. And before we get into this episode, I just want to issue a correction. I think the red mist had clouded my mind because I said that Jack Hanratty had become the USA Women's Sevens head coach. That was incorrect. He is to become the USA Women's 15s head coach. And they're not aiming for the Olympics, they are aiming for the World Cup in Australia. And, some things still hold true. I still think that Alona Meyer should be teaming up with Jack as often as possible, getting as many tips and hints as she can. Obviously, Jack has spent the past year doing 15s with the women's team at the Ottawa GGs. So he's already been making the transition from 7s coaching to 15s coaching. Not to say he's never done 15s coaching either, but this would be his first role as a 15s national head coach. And again, the sentiment is still the same. We wish him the best, so long as it's not against Canada. So, speaking of Canada and speaking of sevens, let's get into the main body of the episode, which is going to be about the Canadian women's turnout at the Cape Town Sevens that happened this past weekend. And, with this new structure of the Seven Series, it is pretty simplified. There's only 2 pools for the men's and the women's, 4 teams in each, 3 pool games, and then 2 playoff games. And I think the hope for a lot of Canadians is that the women can get into the top 4 playoff, which is for the Cup of whichever location they're in. And we've seen in the past seasons that the 2 teams that they have to be are Australia and New Zealand. That's been the way for a while. And I think it's also important to keep in mind that a lot of the Sevens players that would be playing in the 7 Series are currently with clubs in the PWR, getting ready for their season that's currently ongoing, set to finish in March time, just before the Women's Six Nations. But I've put it off as much as I can. It was not a good pool performance for the women, unfortunately. If we look at the record, their opening game was a 19-26 loss to Japan, and that was followed up with a 19-26 loss to Australia, before concluding with a 12-31 loss to France. So, as I said before, Australia, one of the 2 teams that are always going to be a challenge to come up against. But this weekend and past weekend has shown that Japan women have come on leaps and bounds. And France, admittedly, Canada beat them last week, so this is a bit of revenge on their part. But the ultimate result, that Canada is not progressing to the Cup, they're progressing to the 5th place playoff. Then we get into the finals weekend, and the first opponent is Fiji. That's always been a mix of, sometimes they're the best in the world, and other times they're not in that good of a position, and it allows other teams to take advantage. And thankfully, in this case, Canada were able to take advantage. A 33-14 win over Fiji with a hat trick from Asia Hogan-Rochester. That then put them into the 5th place final, where they were up against Japan, which unfortunately they lost in a much closer result, 10-12. So Canada have finished 6th in both rounds of competition. They are currently ranked 7th in the 7 Series, significantly higher than Great Britain in 8th. And especially because we don't know how the structure of the Sevens World Championship is going to take place later this year, it's kind of hard to determine what position Canada are going to be in and what is going to necessitate if there's going to be a promotion or relegation structure. That is yet to be seen. The next round of the 7 Series will be in Singapore for January 31st to February 1st. And yeah, so not the start that the Canadian women wanted. And to add a bit more salt to the wound, it has been announced that Asia Hogan-Rochester will be joining the Sail Shark women in the PWR. So that's another player that's not going to be made available. Ed, what do you make of this so far?
Yeah, I'm surprised Asian Hoga-Rochester wasn't picked up earlier. It's a rebuilding team for Canada. When you look at the team, there's only half a dozen players that have any kind of profile in terms of professional rugby. So they are rebuilding. I think when you look at losing to Japan by a couple of tries and then closing that up. Canada at full strength probably shouldn't lose to Japan, but I love that Japan are on the improve. That's one of the biggest, I think, improvers and the biggest stories around World Rugby is the Japanese women doing well. So hopefully they continue to be a competitive force. Disappointing overall, I'd say for Canada, they would have want to have done better than that, especially with Rochester in the team. Um, but again, rebuilding some of those players their first time in the team, they'll be much better for that experience. And I think, even just having one tournament under their belt will put them in better stead for, I think the next one is Singapore in the new year. So that'll be a good experience for them.
And yeah, I'll pass this question on to you, Jeff. What do you think is that the Canadian women's sevens team should be looking forward to? I mean, we've got the Vancouver Sevens coming up in the new year as well. That's always a great party atmosphere. The men's team will also be present at that tournament, probably in a reduced four-team structure like they had this time round. But yeah, what should be the goal for the Canadian women, especially with fewer big name stars like Asia Hogan-Rochester likely to appear for a couple of rounds at least?
Well, as Ed said, this is a young team, clearly. They're learning, I guess, on the job in some sense. They have a month away before Singapore, I believe.
Mm,
So their goal really should just try to be right now, I think, a top four finish. Not just for Singapore, but even for by the end of this season, this seventh season, because as Ed said, they are a young team. And really, except for the France game, none of their losses have been really blowouts, which is actually a very good sign.
mm,
Keep at it as they keep getting more used to each other on the field at this level of intensity. I mean, their defense should pick up, their attack structure should improve, and hopefully more wins will come.
mm. Yeah, I think that's a good thing to take away. And as we said, that the next round of sevens are going to be in January of 2026. We've effectively come to the end of the 2025 season, whether that's sevens or 15s, both men's and women's. And I think there's a lot for us to look back on, and there have been some dour moments, but there have been some great moments. So I am going to ask you guys, what has been your favorite moment in Canadian rugby in 2025? Jeff, I'll hand it over to you first.
Well, mine would be honestly Canada's men's national team 15s winning in Calgary. That was also the first international rugby game I took my daughter to. So hey, she's one for one. Guess wherever we're playing next summer, I have to guess buy a ticket. So that would be mine. Seeing like a near full strength Canada side take it to the USA or really any opponent. Ardron scoring four tries. As we said before, the men's team didn't have a great year, but they won the game they had to win. So that would be for me.
All right. And Ed, what has been your favorite moment of the year?
Yeah, I think obviously the success of the women's team was a huge highlight. I mean, in terms of redressing some of the things that have been happening in Rugby Canada over the last few years. This year has been pretty good, as Jeff says. For the men's team, it wasn't that great, but winning that game was a big moment. But for the women's team, yeah, the way that they played at the World Cup, Obviously, a big tournament overall for them. My individual highlight from that was the combination between Sophie de Goody and Justine Peltier. Obviously that springboarded de Goody on to win the World Player of the Year for the women's. So, there was something in her performance right throughout the year. She was injured 2024, came back, um, found a number of players in front of her in terms of the pecking order in Rugby Canada, and went into lock and was amazing at lock when it's not really your natural position. Was incredible throughout the year, and to win Player of the Year in a position that you're not, it's not your first position is incredible. But I think one of the reasons that she was able to achieve that was her combination with Peltier. Those two together, running off each other, short balls in and around the ruck, the inside balls, the little reverse passes that Peltier was giving, throwing balls off the ground. No more evident in that game against New Zealand, but that those two together as a combination, phenomenal. And we talked about throughout the year, we talked about how they're redefining a style of play in terms of ruck speed, lightning fast ball. That was impressive, I think, for the women's game, for the game as a whole. So I think my highlight definitely was watching those two players play and dominate at the World Cup.
Yeah, I think especially that game against the Black Ferns in the semi-final. I think that not only confirmed everything we already knew about that team, I think it was also the statement to the world that, hey, we are not the dark horses, we are not the underdogs, we are second in the world on merit, and this is the reason why. Um, so you've both of you have taken like the main games of victory in the men's and women's national 15 side. I could easily say like, a great moment was the women's sevens getting the third place in the seven series, but that was also marred by the last minute decision to change the seven structure, so the men's team were basically left in the dust as a result. So instead, I'm gonna turn my gaze to something that happened a bit more recently, and focusing on the youth and young development. We've seen the Canadian University Men's Rugby Championship be contested for a number of seasons, and it's been UBC, the Thunderbirds, staking their claim. It's basically their cup to lose. And last year we had ATS take the win, the first team from Montreal to win. They were then hosting it this year, so they had home advantage as well. Made it to the final, but it was the Griffins that could at the end. That they've been one of the teams that have been considered. Of the 8 teams there, they're definitely in the top 4, but they've not always been able to demonstrate that, and I think that this was the year that everything finally clicked. Their defense was great, their attack was on point, and even when you're up against the home team, they were able to hold out and get that cup for the first time in their history. And I think it's a great indication of how rugby is developing in the university scene, and it's not just confirmed to BC. It's not just going to be UVic or the Thunderbirds. It's going to be these other teams. And, the structure is obviously different. It's 3 60-minute games over 5 days, more subs as well. But, you can only play who's in front of you. And I think it's also a statement to teams like UBC and any team out in BC, whether that's the Spartans or the Vikes, is that other teams are getting better. It's now your job to get better. A rising tide lifts all boats. So it's a smaller moment, but that's my moment for 2025. And, as we're getting to the end of the year, we're already planning our New Year's resolutions from January 2nd, obviously, because January 1st is a day to stay in and nurse that hangover. So we're looking at hopes, and I'm going to keep this to just Rugby Canada. So, national team, or national body, I should say. What are your hopes for 2026? And Ed, I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the university competition there. I'd love to see Rugby Canada um, double down on the success they've had this year with some real corporate governance direction, and come up with some actual plans on how Canada, number one, stays at the Rugby World Cup, never misses out on a spot for the World Cup again in the future. The funding from that is just such a huge part of how you run a national body. So, what are the plans in place? I'd love to see plans put in place for how the men and women, keep their success up. As Jeff was talking about, get their win rate up. But it's one of those things where a lot of people question what's going on at the top. So I'd love to see some leadership and some direction put in place for 2026.
All right, Jeff, what are your hopes for 2026?
Well, mine are a bit similar to Ed. I kind of have two, one on the pitch, off another one off the pitch. For on the pitch, it's kind of twofold. Win all their home games in the summer series, and then try to like hopefully end the season with a winning record. This is for the men's team of like even 5 wins, 4 losses, or 6-3, if assuming they play 9 tests. That's for on the pitch. Off the pitch, similar to Ed, is I would like to see some concrete plans of how to keep players playing at a high level, semi-pro, whatever level. Whether it's somehow you get the pride playing in that South America competition, or somehow you find the money either through World Rugby or private investors to get a Canadian team into MLR, assuming there's a season after 2026, or even just a revived CRC with like 4 to 6 teams, regional teams that play home and away over the summer. Like a combination of any of those would go a long way to keeping players involved at the highest level and hopefully improving the depth of the men's team.
Hmm. Yeah, I think those are some pretty good hopes. Um, I guess I have two hopes. One a bit more serious, another one a bit more personal. And in this hope, I'm also holding Rugby Canada to account on this, because in their 24 to 29 strategic plan, one of the things they mentioned was they wanted to have 4 high performance centres by 2025. And we've had the memorandum of understanding, but that's not enough. You said have these 4 performance centres by 2025. The idea is 8 by 2029. Well, we're at the end of the year and there's no indication of any development on that front. Obviously, this is all paperwork and stuff, and location have to be chosen, and it's not of the interest or knowledge of the rugby public at this moment to really need to know that information. But I'm hoping for 2026 is that we can get the names of those 4 high performance facilities. We can get coaches and S&C coaches as well. That there's development plans in place for rugby players, whether that's guys in the senior squad or players on the verge that just need that little extra bit to help support them. And so that's my hope, is that the plan that they had in place is actually coming to fruition, and there's something concrete and something that is in use by the end of next year, ideally halfway through the year. But this is the guidelines you set yourself, Rugby Canada. So this is me holding you to account. You have failed to get it for 2025. I understand that this plan came out in early 2024, so, that timeline is less realistic. But if we're talking about unrealistic things, you also wanted the Canadian men to be a top 12 team in the world, and that doesn't seem to be happening at the moment. But, again, that's a hope. And a bit more personal, I'm hoping that one of the home games for either the women's or the men's national 15s team is played in the GTA. Because I want to go to one of these games. Ottawa is too far away, especially if it's on a Friday night. Just something in the GTA, mainly more T than the G in the Greater Toronto area. But yeah, I want to be able to see the national team play on home soil, whether that's in, ideally in Toronto, but if it has to be in Hamilton, fine. But I want to make a weekend of it. I want to have fun. I want to go along to the game. I want to see if there's any fans of the podcast at the games as well. And yeah, just go along and just enjoy. And that is probably going to be it for 2025. We have a few things in the works, but nothing concrete at the moment, so I don't want to promise something. I'm also going to be completely honest with everyone at the moment. There was a point this year where I didn't think if the Rouge Rugby would continue beyond 2025. Obviously, everyone knows that Derek announced that he was leaving the podcast at the start of the year, and I had told Jeff and Ed that the plan was, we'll see how everything goes, but if the men don't qualify for the next World Cup, we're basically just following the women's game for another 4 years. As it came to pass, MLR changed Canadians to international players, and that their numbers have gone down. So there was a strong possibility that if the men didn't qualify, we'd say we'll continue for the Women's Rugby World Cup, and then that would be it. Thankfully, that has not been the case. The men have been able to qualify, and we also know that there's going to be a lot more games coming in 2026. So we'll be carrying on, and we hope that you'll be along to watch us and enjoy us as well. But while there is no international rugby this weekend for Canada, we do have the second round of the pool stage for the Champions and Challenge Cup. That is on Flow Rugby, and you can also watch certain games on the Flow Rugby YouTube page. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out more, as well as our written pieces on our website, therougerugby.ca. We also have our podcast on Spotify and on YouTube at The Rouge Rugby. We're also available across social media, including Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky, all at The Rouge Rugby. Jeff, where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on X at WP Rugby Jeff.
And Ed, where can people find you on social media?
Facebook and YouTube, rugby101_25.
And you can find me across social media at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, that's where we're going to end this episode. Jeff, Ed, thank you for joining me, and thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby Podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. We hope you can join us again next time.